Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Rakshamam. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Charine Trinadapi Sunichena Torod Iva Sahishnuna Manina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Hare Nama Hare Nama Hare Nama Iva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva 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 Gatir Anyatha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna, Yadavaya Namaha. Gopala Govinda Rama, Sri Madhusudana. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarad Hari. Jasodanandana Gopi Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Gavanachari. Jasodanandana Gopi Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome everyone to our weekly Krishna-lila program. I must always remember that what I speak and what I have learned is all because of my loving, eternal, well-wishing friend, my initiating and instructing spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, who opened my eyes, which were blinded by ignorance, and gave me the light of the transcendental knowledge of the Vedas. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This pastime is called Kaliya. Sometimes Krishna used to go with his boyfriends and with Balaram, and sometimes Krishna used to go alone with his friends to the bank of the Yamuna, tending the cows. And so gradually the summer season arrived, and one day, while in the field, the boys and cows became very thirsty and began to drink the water of the Yamuna. The Yamuna, however, had been made poisonous by the venom of the great serpent known as Kaliya. Because the water was so poisonous, the boys and cows became visibly affected immediately after drinking. Suddenly they fell down upon the ground, apparently dead. But then Krishna, who is the life of all that lives, simply cast his merciful glance over them, and all the boys and cows regained consciousness and began to look at one another with great astonishment. They could understand that by drinking the water of the Yamuna they had died, but that the merciful glance of Krishna had restored their lives. Thus, the cowherder boys appreciated the mystic power of Krishna, who is known as Yogishvara, the master of all mystic yogis. So this incident so far teaches us something we learn from the Brahma Samhita. Anyani yasya sakalendriya vritti manti pasyanti panti kalayanti. So, because Krishna is absolute, because Krishna's senses are transcendental, then Krishna's senses are interchangeable. Krishna can do anything with any one of his senses. We can only see with our eyes. We cannot see with our hands. We cannot hear with our mouth. Each sense that we have gotten can only do one function. But Krishna's body, being absolute, being transcendental, the senses are interchangeable. So Krishna could revive the cowherder boys simply by glancing upon them. Let us continue. When Krishna understood that the water of the Yamuna was being polluted by the black serpent Kaliya, Krishna took action against Kaliya and made Kaliya leave the Yamuna and go elsewhere. And thus the Yamuna once again became purified. And when the story was being narrated by Shukadeva Goswami, Maharaj Parikshit became eager to hear more about Krishna's childhood pastimes. Parikshit inquired from Shukadev how Krishna chastised Kaliya, who had been living in the water for many years. Actually, Maharaj Parikshit was becoming more and more enthusiastic to hear the transcendental pastimes of Krishna, and his inquiry was made with great interest. Shukadev narrated the story as follows. So here is another something to point out, that if you find yourself looking forward to this class, and if you find yourself very much interested in attending and hearing, that means your spiritual life is improving. Because the more we become attracted to Krishna, then that means we are becoming spiritually advanced. Since Krishna himself is all attractive, then Krishna's name, fame, form, pastimes, entourage, characteristics, everything about Krishna is attractive. So if you find yourself that you are looking forward to this class and are actually relishing the narration, that is a very good sign, and that means you have been blessed by Krishna. Within the river Yamuna, there was a great lake, and in that lake the black serpent Kaliya used to live. Because of Kaliya's poison, the whole area was so contaminated that it emanated a poisonous vapor 24 hours a day. If a bird happened to pass over that spot, it would immediately die and fall dead into the water. Due to this poisonous effect of the Yamuna's vapors, the trees and grass near the bank of the Yamuna had all dried up. Lord Krishna saw the effect of the great serpent's poison, for the whole river that ran before Vrindavan was now deadly. Krishna, who advented himself just to kill all undesirable elements in the world, immediately climbed up into a big Kadamba tree on the bank of the Yamuna. The Kadamba tree is a tree bearing round yellow flowers, but they are generally seen only in the Vrindavan area. After climbing to the top of the tree, Krishna tightened his belt cloth and, flapping his arms just like a wrestler, jumped into the midst of the poisonous lake. The Kadamba tree from which Krishna had jumped was the only tree there which was not dead. Some Bhagavatam commentators say that due to being touched by the lotus feet of Krishna, that the dead tree immediately became alive. And in some other Puranas it is stated that previously Garuda, the eternal carrier of Vishnu, knew that Krishna in the future would take this action of punishing Kaliya, and so Garuda put some nectar into this tree in order to preserve it. When Lord Krishna jumped into the water, the river overflooded its banks up to a distance of 100 yards, as if something very large had fallen into it. This exhibition of Krishna's strength is not at all uncommon, because Krishna is the reservoir of all strength. And when Krishna was swimming about, just like a great strong elephant, Krishna made a tumultuous sound which the great black serpent Kaliya could hear. The tumult was intolerable for Kaliya, and Kaliya could understand that this was an attack. This was an attack to his home. Therefore, Kaliya immediately came before Krishna. Kaliya saw that Krishna was indeed worth seeing, because Krishna's body was so beautiful and delicate. Its color resembled that of a rain cloud, and Krishna's legs resembled the lotus flower. Krishna was decorated with Srivatsa, jewels, and yellow garments. Krishna was smiling with a beautiful face and was playing in the river Yamuna with great strength. But in spite of Krishna's beautiful features, Kaliya felt great anger within his heart, and thus Kaliya grabbed Krishna with his mighty coils. Seeing the incredible way in which Krishna was enveloped in the coils of Kaliya, the affectionate cowherder boys and other inhabitants of Vrindavan immediately became stunned out of fear. They had dedicated everything to Krishna. They had dedicated their lives, property, affection, activities. Indeed, everything was for Krishna. And when they saw Krishna in that condition, they became overwhelmed with fear, and they fell down on the ground. All the cows, bulls, and small calves became overwhelmed with grief, and they began to look at Krishna with great anxiety. Out of fear, they could only cry in agony, standing erect on the bank, unable to help their beloved Krishna. So this is another feature of Vrindavan. Everyone and everything in Vrindavan is attracted to Krishna. So even the cows, the bulls, and the calves have feelings of love for Krishna. That is the special feature of this Vrajadam, Vrindavan. It is the unique place where everyone and everything simply loves Krishna. While this scene was taking place on the bank of the Yamuna, there were ill omens manifest. The earth trembled, meteors fell from the sky, and the left side of men's bodies shivered. All these are indications of great immediate danger. And observing the inauspicious signs, the cowherder men, including Maharaj Nanda, became very anxious out of fear. At the same time, they were informed that Krishna had gone to the pasturing ground without his elder brother Balaram. So as soon as Nanda and Yashoda and all the cowherder men heard this news, they became even more anxious. Out of their great affection for Krishna, but being unaware of the extent of Krishna's potencies, they became overwhelmed with grief and anxiety because they had nothing dearer than Krishna, and because they had dedicated their everything, life, property, affection, mind, and activities to Krishna. Because of their great attachment for Krishna, they thought, "Oh, today Krishna is surely going to be vanquished." All the inhabitants of Vrindavan came out of the village to see Krishna. The assembly consisted of children, old men, women, animals, and all other kinds of living entities. They knew that Krishna was their only means of sustenance. And while this was happening, Balaram, who is the master of all knowledge, simply stood there smiling. For Balaram knew how powerful his younger brother Krishna was, and that there was actually no cause for anxiety when Krishna was fighting with an ordinary serpent of the material world. And therefore, Balaram did not personally take part in their sorrow. On the other hand, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, becoming disturbed, began to search out Krishna by following the impression of Krishna's footprints on the ground, and thus they moved hastily towards the bank of the Yamuna. Finally, by following the footprints which were marked with flag, bow, and kanchal, the inhabitants of Vrindavan arrived at the riverbank and saw that all the cows and boys were weeping to behold Krishna, who was now enwrapped in the coils of the black serpent. So this information here, that they followed Krishna's footprints, and those footprints were marked with the flag, bow, and kanchal. I use this as an example that if somebody says such and such a person is God, then my response is, I want to see the bottom of your so-called God's feet. Because if their feet do not have these symbols, then they are not God, they are an impostor. While Balaram was smiling to see their lamentation, all the inhabitants of Brajabhumi merged into the ocean of grief because they thought that Krishna was now finished. Although the residents of Vrindavan did not know much about Krishna, their love for Krishna was beyond comparison. As soon as they saw that Krishna was in the river Yamuna, enveloped by the serpent Kaliya, and that all the boys and cows were lamenting, they simply began to think of Krishna's friendship, Krishna's smiling face, Krishna's sweet words, and Krishna's dealings with them. Thinking of all these, and seeing that their Krishna was now within the clutches of Kaliya, they at once felt that the three worlds had now become vacant. Almost all the inhabitants of Vrindavan had the highest ecstatic love for Krishna. Mother Yashoda then arrived, and she wanted to enter the river Yamuna, and being checked, Yashoda fainted. Yashoda's friends, who were equally aggrieved, were shedding tears like torrents of rain or waves of the river. But in order to bring Mother Yashoda back to consciousness, they began to speak very loudly about all the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. Mother Yashoda remained still as if dead, because her consciousness was concentrated on the face of her child Krishna. Nanda Maharaj and all the other cowherder men, who had dedicated everything, including their lives, to Krishna, were all ready to enter the waters of the Yamuna. But Lord Balaram checked them, because Balaram alone was in perfect knowledge that there was no danger. And so, for 2 hours, Krishna remained just like an ordinary child, gripped in the coils of Kaliya. But when Krishna saw that all the inhabitants of Gokula, including his mother and father, the gopis, the cows, the cowherder boys, all of them were just on the point of death, and that they had no shelter for salvation from imminent death, Krishna immediately freed himself. Krishna began to expand his body, And when the serpent Kaliya tried to hold Krishna, Kaliya felt a great strain. On account of the strain, Kaliya's coil slackened, and Kaliya had no alternative but to let loose the personality of Godhead from his grasp. Kaliya then became very angry, and his great hoods expanded. Kaliya exhaled poisonous fumes from his nostrils. Kaliya's eyes blazed like fire, and flames issued from his mouth. The great serpent Kaliya remained still for some time, just looking at Krishna. Licking his lips with bifurcated tongues, the serpent Kaliya looked at Krishna with double hoods, and his eyesight was full of poison. But Krishna immediately pounced upon Kaliya, just as Garuda swoops down upon a snake. Thus attacked, Kaliya looked for an opportunity to bite Krishna, but Krishna moved around Kaliya. As Krishna and Kaliya moved in a circle, the serpent gradually became fatigued, and Kaliya's strength seemed to diminish considerably. Krishna immediately pressed down on Kaliya's hoods and then jumped up upon them. Krishna's lotus feet became tinged with red from the rays of the jewels on Kaliya's hoods. Then he, who is the original artist of all fine arts, such as dancing, began to dance upon the hoods of the serpent Kaliya, although they were moving to and fro. So you see the picture behind me. That is where we are now in the pastime. Krishna is dancing on Kaliya's heads. Upon seeing this, the denizens of the upper planets showered flowers, beat drums, played different types of flutes, and sang various prayers and songs. In this way, all the denizens of heaven, such as Gandharvas, Siddhas, and demigods, became very pleased. While Krishna was dancing on his hoods, Kaliya tried to push Krishna down with some of his other hoods. Kaliya had about 100 hoods, but Krishna took control of them. Krishna then began to dash Kaliya with his lotus feet, and this was more than the serpent could bear. Gradually, Kaliya was reduced to struggling for his very life. Kaliya vomited all kinds of refuse and exhaled fire, while throwing up poisonous material from within. Kaliya became reduced in his sinful situation. Out of great anger, Kaliya began to struggle for existence and tried to raise one of his hoods to kill Krishna. Krishna immediately captured that hood and subdued it by kicking it and dancing on it. It actually appeared as if the Supreme Lord Vishnu was being worshipped. The poisons emanating from the mouth of the serpent appeared to be like flower offerings. Kaliya then began to vomit blood instead of poison. Kaliya was now completely fatigued. His whole body appeared to be broken by the kicking of Krishna. However, within his mind, Kaliya finally began to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Kaliya surrendered unto Krishna. Kaliya now realized that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, the master of everything. The wives of the serpent, known as the Nagapatnis, saw that their husband had been subdued by Krishna's kicking, and that Kaliya was almost at the point of death due to bearing the heavy burden of Krishna, within whose abdomen the whole universe remains. Kaliya's wives prepared to worship Krishna, and in their haste, their clothes, hair, and ornaments became disarrayed. The Nagapatnis also surrendered to Krishna and began to pray. The Nagapatnis appeared before Krishna, putting forward their offspring, and anxiously offered respectful obeisances, falling down on the bank of the Yamuna. The Nagapatnis knew that Krishna is the shelter of all surrendered souls, and so the Nagapatnis desired to release their husband from the impending danger, and they wanted to please Krishna with their prayers. The Nagapatnis then prayed, "O dear Lord, you are equal to everyone. For you, there is no distinction between sons, friends, or enemies. And therefore the punishment which you have so kindly offered to Kaliya is exactly befitting. You have descended especially for the purpose of annihilating all kinds of disturbing elements within the world. And because you are the absolute truth, there is no difference between your mercy and your punishment. We think, therefore, that this apparent punishment of Kaliya is actually some benediction. We consider that your punishment is actually your great mercy upon us, because when you punish someone, it is to be understood that the reactions of their sinful activities are being eradicated. It is already clear that this creature, Kaliya, appearing in the body of a serpent, must have been overburdened with all kinds of sin. Otherwise, how could he have the body of a serpent? Your dancing on his hoods has reduced all the sinful results of actions caused by his having this body of a serpent. It is therefore very auspicious that you have become angry with him and have punished Kaliya in this way. We are very much astonished to see how you have become so much pleased with this serpent, who evidently must have performed various religious activities in past lives that pleased everyone. Kaliya must have undergone all kinds of penances and austerities previously, humbly honored others, and executed universal welfare activities for all living creatures. Oh dear Lord, we are simply astonished to see that this Kaliya is so fortunate as to have the dust of your lotus feet on his head. Indeed, this is a fortune sought after by great saintly persons. Why, even the goddess of fortune underwent severe austerities just to have the blessing of the dust of your lotus feet. So how is it that Kaliya is so easily getting this dust on his head? Dear Lord, although he is born in a species of life which is fostered by the most abominable modes of material nature, accompanied with the quality of anger, this king of the serpents, Kaliya, has achieved something very, very rare. Living entities who are wandering within this universe in different species of life can very easily achieve the greatest benediction only by your mercy. We therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto you, our dear Lord, because you are the Supreme Person and you are living as the Supersoul within every living entity. We can partially understand that you are within our hearts as the witness of all our activities. But it is very difficult to appreciate your presence, although every one of us can do so to some extent. O Lord, we are submitting our prayers unto you, for you can appreciate that this poor serpent Kaliya is going to have to give up his life. O Lord, you know that for us, this Kaliya is our life and everything. Therefore, we are praying unto you that you kindly excuse Kaliya, our husband, because if this serpent dies, then we shall all be in great difficulty. So looking upon us only, please excuse this great offender. Our dear Lord, we are offering our loving service unto you because we are all your eternal servants. So now you can order us to do whatever you like, for every living being can be relieved from all kinds of despair if one agrees to abide by your orders. After the Nagapatnis submitted their prayers, Lord Krishna then released Kaliya from punishment. Kaliya was already unconscious from being constantly struck by the feet of Krishna upon his head. And upon regaining consciousness and being released from punishment, Kaliya got back his life force and the working power of his senses. With folded hands, Kaliya humbly began to pray to Krishna. My dear Lord, I have been born in such a species that by nature I am angry and envious, being in the darkest region of the modes of nature. Your Lordship knows very well that it is very difficult to give up one's natural instincts, although by such instincts the living creature transmigrates from one body to another. My dear Lord, you are the original creator of the modes of material nature by which this universe is created. You are the cause of the different kinds of mentality possessed by living creatures, by which they have attained different varieties of bodies. My dear Lord, I am born as a serpent. Therefore, my natural instinct is that I am very angry. So, how is it then possible to give up my acquired nature without your mercy? Indeed, it is very difficult to get out of the clutches of your Maya, for it is by your Maya that we remain enslaved. My dear Lord, kindly excuse me for my inevitable material tendencies. I surrender unto you. Now you can punish me or save me as you desire. After hearing this, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was acting as a small human child, thus ordered the serpent. Kaliya, you must immediately leave this place and go to the ocean, and you should leave without delay. You can take with you all your offspring, wives, and everything you possess. but you should never again pollute the waters of the Yamuna. Let it be drunk by my cows and cowherder boys without hindrance." Krishna then declared that the order given to Kaliya Nag be recited and heard by everyone, so that no one need fear Kaliya any longer. So now, my students, is your benediction. Listen to this benediction. Anyone who hears the narration of this Kaliya serpent and his punishment by Krishna will need fear no more the envious activities of snakes. So you got a benediction. Krishna continued to speak. If one takes a bath in the Kaliya lake, where my cowherder boyfriends and I have bathed, or if one fasts for a day and offers oblations to the forefathers from the water of this lake, he or she will become relieved from all kinds of sinful reactions. O Kaliya, you came here out of fear of Garuda, who wanted to eat you in the beautiful land by the ocean. But now, after seeing the marks where I have touched your head with my lotus feet, Garuda will no longer disturb you. So, Krishna was now pleased with Kaliya and his wives. Immediately after hearing his order, Kaliya snake and his wives began to worship Krishna with great offerings of nice garments, flowers, garlands, jewels, ornaments, sandalwood pulp, lotus flowers, and nice eatable fruits. In this way, they pleased the master of Garuda, Krishna, of whom they were very much afraid. Then, obeying the orders of Lord Krishna, all of them left the lake within the Yamuna. When Krishna finally came out of Kaliya's lake, Krishna was seen by all his friends and relatives on the bank of the Yamuna. Krishna appeared before them, nicely decorated, smeared all over with chandan pulp, bedecked with valuable jewels and stones, and almost completely covered with gold. The inhabitants of Vrindavan, including the cowherder boys and men, the gopis, Mother Yashoda, Maharaj Nanda, and all the cows and calves saw Krishna coming from the Yamuna, and it was as though they had recovered their very lives. When a person regains one's life, naturally one becomes absorbed in pleasure and joyfulness. So they each in turn pressed Krishna to their chest, and thus they felt a great relief. Mother Yashoda, Rohini, Maharaj Nanda, and the cowherder men became so happy that they embraced Krishna and thought that they had achieved the ultimate goal of life. Balaram also embraced Krishna, but he was laughing because when everyone else was so overwhelmed with anxiety, Balaram knew all along what would happen to Krishna. Then, all the trees on the bank of the Yamuna, along with all the cows, calves, and bulls, were full of pleasure because of Krishna's appearance. The Brahmana inhabitants of Vrindavan immediately came with their wives to congratulate Krishna and his family members. And because Brahmanas are considered to be the spiritual masters of society, they offered their blessings to Krishna and his family. On account of Krishna's release, they also asked Maharaj Nanda to give them some charity on this occasion. Being so pleased by Krishna's return, Maharaj Nanda gave many cows and much gold in charity to the Brahmanas. And while Nanda Maharaj was thus engaged, Mother Yashoda simply embraced Krishna and made Krishna sit on her lap while she shed tears continuously. After hearing of the chastisement of Kaliya, King Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami as to why Kaliya had left his original beautiful land and why Garuda was so antagonistic to after hearing the chastisement of Kaliya. Shukadeva Goswami informed Parikshit that the island known as Nagalai was inhabited by serpents, and that Kaliya was one of the chief serpents there. Being accustomed to eating snakes, Garuda used to come to this island and kill many serpents at will. Some of them he actually ate, and some were unnecessarily killed. The reptile society became so disturbed that their leader, Vasuki, appealed to Lord Brahma for protection. Lord Brahma made an arrangement by which Garuda would not create a disturbance. And so, on each half-moon day, the reptile community would offer a serpent to Garuda. The serpent was to be kept underneath a tree as a sacrificial offering to Garuda. Garuda was satisfied with this offering, and therefore he did not disturb any other serpents. But gradually, Kaliya took advantage of this situation. Kaliya was unnecessarily puffed up by the volume of his accumulated poison, as well as by his material power. And so Kaliya thought, why should Garuda be offered this sacrifice? Kaliya then ceased offering any sacrifice. Instead, Kaliya himself ate the offering intended for Garuda. When Garuda, the great devotee carrier of Vishnu, understood that Kaliya was eating the offered sacrifice, Garuda became very angry and rushed to the island to kill the offensive serpent. Kaliya tried to fight Garuda and faced him with his many hoods and poisonous sharp teeth. Kaliya attempted to bite Garuda, and Garuda, the son of Tarksha, in great anger and with great force, just befitting the carrier of Lord Vishnu, struck the body of Kaliya with his effulgent golden wings. Kaliya, who is also known as Kadrusuta, son of Kadru, immediately fled to the lake known as Kaliya Hrada, which lay within the Yamuna River, in which Garuda could never approach. Kaliya took shelter within the water of the Yamuna for the following reason. Just as Garuda went to the island of the Kaliya snake, he also used to go to the Yamuna to catch fish to eat. However, there was a great yogi known as Saubhari Muni, who used to meditate within the water there, and who was sympathetic with the fish. Saubhari Muni asked Garuda not to come there and disturb the fish. Although Garuda was not under anyone's order, being the carrier of Lord Vishnu, he did not disobey the order of the great yogi. Instead of staying and eating many fish, he just carried off one big fish, who was their leader. Saubari Muni was very sorry that one of the leaders of the fish was taken away by Garuda, and thinking of this protection, Saubari Muni cursed Garuda with the following words: "Henceforward, from this day, if Garuda comes here to catch fish, then I say this with all my strength: Garuda will immediately be killed." This curse was known only to Kaliya and Garuda. Kaliya was therefore confident that Garuda would not be able to come there, and so Kaliya thought it wise to take shelter of the lake within the Yamuna. But, as we have seen from this chapter, Kaliya's taking shelter of Saubari Muni was not successful, for Kaliya was driven away from the Yamuna by Krishna, who is the master of Garuda. It should be noted that Garuda is directly related to Lord Vishnu and Krishna, and so he is so powerful that he is never subject to anyone's order or curse. Actually, the cursing of Garuda, who is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam to be of the stature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, was actually an offense on the part of Saubari Muni. And although Garuda did not try to retaliate, Saubari Muni was not saved from his offensive act against a great Vaishnava personality, because due to this offense, Saubari Muni fell down from his yogic position and afterwards became a householder, a sense enjoyer in the material world. The fall down of Saubari Muni, who was supposed to be absorbed in spiritual bliss by meditation, is an instruction to the offender of devotees. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, prayers of protection for all my students in Cologne and elsewhere. Special protection. Namaste Narasimhaya, Prahlad Aklad Dayane, Hiranyakashi Vakshaha, Shilatanganakalaye, Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsingho, Yato Yato Yami Tato Nrsingha, Bahir Nrsingho Hridaye Nrsingho, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye. Tavakara Kamala Varei Nakam Adbhuta Sringam, Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam, Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Jagadish, Jai Jagadish, Jai Jagadish Hare Hare. Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajakacarya Ashtottara Sattva Sri Sriman, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Syama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Yamuna Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Kaliya Pastime Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled Cologne devotees and elsewhere. All glories to all the Krishna book students, whoever you may be, wherever you may be in the three worlds. Hari Hari Bol, Hari Hari Bol, Hari 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 Bol.